Sigel presents RASSLIN Roundup, a special look at interesting highlights and events from the world of wrestling with wrestling's popular Paul Boesch.
Well, thank you and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We've got some things that you might consider a rare treat. I don't know if you'd recognize the young fireball in the picture there. These films were resurrected from some home movies taken 30 years ago, let's put it that way. And the young fellow who is springing up from the mat with such alacrity would have some difficulty doing it today. Later on, we're going to have more of this film for you. We're just showing you this to sort of titillate your imagination, and we hope you're going to enjoy watching it. But the gentleman involved, reaching for the ropes, is former world's heavyweight champion at that time, Dick Shikat, and the man standing up there applying that leg split just happens to be, as they say in the big high-priced programs, your commentator. Roundup from time to time. The one we have for you now is rather unusual. There were some pictures taken on a home movie camera just 30 years ago of some matches in which I was involved in around the New York City area against some men who were very, very prominent at that time, and I was just a young stripling trying to get my feet on the canvas in the wrestling game. We thought perhaps the contrast in the way things are done now might be of interest to you if you'll just bear in mind that these films are 30 years old and not done professionally. We don't like to make excuses before them, but did you ever see anybody who showed home movies who didn't? But we won't make any excuses for the action. We'll let you decide that yourself. But now this first match took place in the Bronx Coliseum. The gentleman with the long tights is a man named Dick Shikat, who had defeated, Jim Londos defeated for the world's heavyweight title. There is this young fellow named Boesch applying a head scissor, and here you see now with that fast and speedy getaway. This is a Japanese arm lock applied by Shikat, and now a leg stretch applied by, or a leg split applied to Shikat. Shikat was from Germany. He was a tough man. He wrestled in Houston many, many times back in the 1930s, as did his brother Paul Shikat. And here you see the pressure being put on the foot. The only thing I envy about this picture is the hair. So Shikat is trying to make the ropes. Those ropes are tied together. This was a big ring in the Bronx Coliseum, and they were tied together in the hope of keeping people from falling through them. This shoulder butt, and here is Shikat being pursued and mauled around by the shoulder butt, which was, at that time, one of the holds I favored. Here is a ride-em cowboy type hold, a figure 4 body scissor. But now we shift to another match, if you'll pardon the quick change of site. This is the St. Nicholas Arena, which was torn down recently, incidentally, and was a famous landmark. And Jack Sherry, one of the leading heavyweight contenders and one of the old-time tough fellows, is my opponent on this occasion. Now you see various versions of a head scissor as Sherry tries to get out. Here is a rocking chair split. The men sitting around the ringside there are the press and judges, as required by the state of New York. And here I go again for the same rocking chair split and use of the shoulder butt and the flying tackle. Sherry was a tough individual and a hard man to wrestle, as anybody would tell you. And like all of our home movies, you've got to say one thing about it. They end properly. They just come apart. But if you were that old and you had been sitting around in an old box for that long, I think that you would probably appreciate the fact that almost anything can happen to you. I assure you, that wasn't in our original. We have any more left of the film? We do? Well, we'll go back there again in just a minute. We'll show you that nothing is more indomitable than a man who wants to show home movies. So Sherry is still on the receiving end. And these pictures were taken by a friend of mine, I might add, or is that obvious? And he only took them when I was doing the assaulting. And some of these things that have happened to Sherry in this particular match, I'm happy to record, because men who knew him at that particular time wouldn't agree that they could be done. But Sherry, thank goodness, found himself on the canvas more times that night than he had in many and many a moon. How did the matches make out? Well, we'll talk about that in just a moment, but the hold right now is a hammerlock, as it was for a moment, and then Sherry found himself flipped over, even bust the string in his tights, which kept him busy for a while. Again, it's a hammerlock with Sherry on the receiving end, and here is that rocking chair split. Here is an arm stretch and all kinds of fast movement. There must have been something wrong with this film. I couldn't have been that fast. Here is Sherry again being pursued with a rolling front headlock, but he was a hard man to get down to that canvas, and an even more difficult one to do anything with, whether you were flying, tackling, or what you do. This is a match that took place in Vancouver, British Columbia. A man who wrestled there at that time was Ranjit Singh. This took place in Vancouver, British Columbia, and if I get a good look at his opponent, I might be able to tell you. I'm not. Oh, that was Silent Smith, a man who was a deaf mute, and a fellow like Dick Raines would remember this particular film quite well. The reason we took this was to show you the drop-kicking sensation of the 1930s. That was a long, long time ago, and we are very thankful that at least that was in it. Now you're looking at Dick Raines, who was one of the participants in this one-night tournament in which this scattering of movies were taken. You saw Dick refereeing just a while ago. You see him in his long tights, and Dick at that time was a tough individual. Singh had just come over from India at that particular time, and he had his own way of doing things in what he thought was a peculiar type of showmanship. There was no question about it. And Raines was confused for a long period of time in this particular match until he finally solved the style. But there you see former wrestler and now referee Dick Raines with his broad shoulders trying to move in on this boy from Calcutta, India, Ranjit Singh. So a conglomeration of action that we hope did not intrude too much on it, and we hope it doesn't keep you awake tonight. We'll be back here in a moment, right after this word.